in their like genocidal death cult neoliberal ideology to ensure that the rich never have to give up anything, their new selling point is just make more.
Genocidal is like a really strong term to just be throwing at people like crazy. I think if we had one of these revolutions, it would probably be very bloody and it would be kind of a disaster. If the bourgeoisie controls the government, why do they need Ezra Klein to advocate for policy change? My last question to Bad Empanada is, why do you like the status quo so much? If you guys have been on the internet recently, you might have heard of this book called Abundance. It was written by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson, and it has been all the rage these days on Twitter and across the internet with people taking different sides on the book's contents. If you want to learn more about the idea that it champions, the abundance agenda, I've already made a video on this topic. Today, I'm going to be responding to one of the critics of this agenda, Bad Empanada, and I'm going to be doing it with my friend Ryan Giddy, my fellow YouTuber friend, a friend I've known for before I was even making YouTube videos. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to talking about abundance.
Yeah, I thought this video would be a good opportunity for us to respond to a lot of the criticisms that have been levied, because I think it's like indicative of a lot of the criticisms that are going around. And hopefully this could be good faith. Bad Empanada, I don't know a crazy amount about you, but no personal beef with anybody. We just want to interact with your arguments.
Anyway, you might have heard of this idiotic shit. Like, neoliberals are trying to rebrand neoliberalism as the abundance movement. Because, you know, neoliberalism, liberalism, these are like not big words with the youth. So what they're saying now is we need abundance. What about if instead of saying, you know, the honest thing, we don't want anything to be taken away from rich people and given to poor people. What if instead of that we said, we want abundance, we want you to have more stuff. Like, this is a rebrand of neoliberalism. I'm going to tell you why. What would it look like if philanthropy celebrated black abundance instead? Ooh, what is abundance? Let's check it out. Why is it like phrased around black lives, black? It's all black. It's like identity politics weaponized for neoliberalism. What a fucking joke. Okay, there's no way that's the actual official website. It's all about black people. That's like a side project they made to like appeal to black people or something, or like frame it in the identity politics vein.
Okay. Way to stop it really quickly. Ryan, what do you think about that?
So I think first, he's absolutely right. Neoliberalism is not big with the youth, I think is how he put it. I think it's important to say, though, I don't think abundance is neoliberalism. And if you read the book, you'll see they're definitely consciously trying to channel this sort of New Deal politics. They make references to FDR all the time. They want to expand state capacity, not reduce it, which was a key kind of neoliberal project. And at the end, you know, you have Thompson making references to Keynes's The End of Laissez-Faire and talking about, you know, things Marx was right about. So I don't think that this is neoliberalism. It is liberalism, though. So he's right about that.
Right. So it's weird whenever people say Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson are neoliberals, because it requires you to not either know what neoliberalism means or to not know what their ideology is by looking at any of the content they produce, right? Neoliberals are people that are fundamentally anti the state, right? We're thinking about Milton Friedman. Sort of Thatcher and Reagan are usually associated with the term. They want to shrink the state. They want less spending. They want less regulation. They want less taxation, yada, yada, yada. Ezra Klein, Derek Thompson, they're kind of neutral on the question of regulation. They like some, they dislike others. On taxation, they want higher taxes. On spending, they want higher spending, right? Ezra Klein is somebody who's talked a lot about health insurance policy, the necessity of universal health care. And they've even made it explicit that part of the reason why they champion the abundance agenda is that it's necessary to make a lot of kind of left-wing redistributive ends, right, possible, right, to make Medicare for all possible and actually a workable thing. And I'll actually roll a clip right now of Derek Thompson talking about how he sees welfare policy as working with the abundance agenda to eliminate poverty.
If you think about it from a first principle standpoint, you know, what if what you wanted to do was to bring American poverty as close to 0.0% as you possibly could? You got a bunch of smart people into a room. You said, what can we possibly do? In my opinion, the answer would include a lot of what are sometimes called demand side policies, a lot of redistribution of income. The child tax credit, I think, would be essential. Expanding the earned income tax credit would be essential. Expanding cash welfare might be essential. Certainly redistributing income from the rich to the poor would be essential. These are demand side policies. They're tax and spending policies.
The abundance agenda is not just Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson's thing. It's a big thing. It's kind of like the Green New Deal, right? There's socialists that champion it. There's social democrats. For the abundance agenda, it's just people that want to grow the economy. They want pro-growth policies, and there's a lot of different regulatory things which can obstruct that. So there are people that oppose redistribution, which support the abundance agenda, and there's actual socialists which support the abundance agenda. I think that we should judge the ideas in the abundance agenda on their own merits, not unlike the other views of some of their advocates. And I think it's weird whenever people want to just pretend that everybody who supports the abundance agenda is somebody who's doing it for a fundamentally bad faith reason. Everyone who's doing it is doing it because they hate redistribution. It's really irrelevant to the question of redistribution, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, one of the key examples that Klein and Thompson go back to all the time, which I think should be really important to people who are more left or are socialists, is the fact that public housing in the United States is incredibly expensive to build. In many cases, more expensive to build than market housing, and that's just not doable. I mean, if you want social housing in the United States, if you're a socialist who wants to socialize housing, it needs to be cheaper to build.
Right. And if the government can't build things effectively, if the government can't do things effectively and efficiently, well, it can't be very large, right? Like, isn't a prerequisite to having a large state, it being competent, efficient, and effective. The abundance agenda is trying to offer that, right? Whenever the government spends millions of dollars to build a bathroom, people don't want a large government, and like rightfully so, right? It's kind of bad at doing stuff, right? If the government if we create a universal healthcare system, but there's not enough hospital beds for everyone and the wait times are crazy, well, people don't want a huge, super large government, and rightfully so. Shouldn't we want the government to effectively do things?
Yeah,
I
I,
think
I
so.
think so. Yeah.
But basically, the thesis of these guys is we don't need to take away from rich people. We don't need to redistribute. What we need to do is build more and more, produce more and more. And that way, you will get more. So there's no need for you to go against the rich because the rich are working to make more for you. That is the thesis of this movement.
So I think one of the fundamental issues with this analysis is that a lot of the ways in which we actually have scarcity, artificial amounts of scarcity, is due to powerful interests that are disproportionately wealthy, right? So we have a doctor shortage in part because of the doctor lobby, right, which is disproportionately wealthy. I always point to this example because I think it's very illustrative. We have a ban on direct automotive sales in the state of Texas so that car dealerships can have more business. That is something that makes us poor and it makes car prices higher. It creates artificial scarcity, but it's not there because of workers or protecting consumers or anything like that. It's there to benefit a special interest group that is powerful and wealthy. And I think that's usually the case across the board.
I think that's absolutely right. There's a million different examples, just like the cars, of middlemen using the government to insert themselves and make themselves indispensable, and basically profiteering off of it, making things cost more, take longer to do, and making services worse.
Right. Like the primary beneficiary of housing scarcity, of housing shortages is
It's
landlords,
landlords.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're the ones that will often lobby against more apartments being built on their block because they don't want more competition, right? They don't want their tenants who are being mistreated to be able to have the opportunity to go somewhere else. And that's one of those things I find so weird. The abundance agenda is fundamentally a pro competition agenda. Let's have more suppliers, right? Let's make it easier to enter the market, right? Let's drive down those profit margins, drive down those costs, right? And so it's not just this thing about affordability, it's also forcing incumbents, powerful economic groups to compete with each other, right? Which you would think a lot of the people, some of the people that are critiquing are antitrust. You would think they would appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah, I would think so too. And it's interesting. Klein and Thompson often talk about how they didn't expect some of this pushback from, I think they call it the neo-Brandeisians, or kind of the antitrust left, specifically for that reason.
Right. I think some of it comes down to just tribalism. Like
Yeah.
some people, they feel like there's some of the folks that champion this idea are from the other team
Hmm.
in like the party.
Yeah.
And so they don't want to agree with anything those people say. And not only do they want to disagree with what they're saying, they don't want to like entertain the idea that they're coming with it in good faith and deal with each piece of it independently. No, it's like this is a fundamentally bad faith project, which is coming from a bad place and should be is like an existential threat to
Yeah.
all the policies that we want. We either have
Mhm.
those or these. And I think that's just not a healthy way of looking at these things. I think you should look at every single policy. Agenda is a huge package, judge it on its merits, right? And then you could, if you want to judge advocates and their intentions, judge each one individually, right? But like judging the entire everybody who supports it as if they want one specific thing or they have one specific intention, it just seems impossible that that's true. And I don't think that you should do that. I think it's a bad way to approach the world.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think a lot of the ideas are good. I mean, I think we do need growth if we want people to live better lives, and I want people to live better lives. Unfortunately, I think Klein and Thompson sometimes haven't done themselves any favors in terms of making themselves like great, perfect messengers to win an intra-left uh, fight within the Democratic Party, just because they sort of hang out in spaces that, I mean, they're fully aware that are not popular with the rest of the Democratic Party, and maybe that's good for the broad, like, um, maybe that's good, maybe that's bad in the long run. I just think that is probably
Well,
where a lot
that's
of
why
the
I think the
hate's
idea
coming
that they're
from.
like the kings of the movement. I mean, this has been going on way longer than
Yeah,
that. A lot of these
yeah,
ideas have been around for a very long time. They're just kind of marketing the ideas. And
yeah.
it's like, yeah, nothing should be tied too closely to any specific people. You just kind of talk about each idea individually, whether the package is generally good. And I think we'd argue
Yeah,
yes.
if the ideas are good, the ideas are good.
More. So there's no need for you to go against the rich because the rich are working to make more for you. That is the thesis of this movement. Now, this is a completely insane thing to be talking about. For one simple reason, something called climate change. You can see here Ezra Klein, who is like, I don't know who this guy is. He's like a Twitter guy, basically. He's no one. But he got famous because he posted on Twitter about he says, we have not made enough of the things that we need. That's his whole thing. The problem is not a lack of equality. The problem is a lack of more. So there's this problem with this idea. It's called climate change. And it's funny how neoliberals claim to be against climate change, claim to be like for dealing with it, when now they're just actively advocating to build more shit at a time when we very much need to not do that. The problem is not that we don't have enough stuff in the world. The world has more than enough stuff for everyone already. The problem is, it is the distribution.
Okay, this is like one of the most offensively wrong things that I've heard in a long time. The GDP, if you adjust it for purchasing power around the world per person, is $22,000. That is not a lot, right? Because you're adjusting for purchasing power. If you don't adjust, it's like 12,000. Do you want to live on $22,000 a year, right? And that's assuming perfectly even distribution. Of course, you can't have perfectly even distribution. The people that work more are going to get paid more, right? So it's like there's simply no way that at this point in time the world has enough for everyone to have a good standard of living. So obviously we need to grow. Um, what are your
And I
thoughts?
don't even think, I mean, I think we're going to grow. I don't think that bad empanada is going to stop, people living in grinding pre-industrial poverty from wanting to industrialize. And the fact of the matter is, we either invent ways for them to industrialize without as much pollution as the United States and Britain and other, Western countries put out whenever they were industrializing, or we don't, and climate change gets worse because there's no way people are going to live like that if they have another option. No one wants to live in poverty.
Right. So make America more expensive. It's not really a good campaign slogan. But here's the good news. The economy has been growing and emissions are falling, right? And we'll show it on the screen right now. Emissions are falling around the West. They're falling all over the place in countries that are growing. And actually, it's in large part because of new growth, new things that they're doing, right? So we want to reduce emissions in the United States. How do we do that? Do we just, I don't know, all become poor? Do we like go eat like less food and drive less and watch less TV and spend less time on YouTube? No, right? We use more renewable energy. Well, wait, we have to build that, right? We need new transmission lines. We need to get the lithium ion batteries and develop them, right? We need new electric vehicles, right? Or maybe we want high speed rail. Somebody has to build that, right? And what is obstructing that? A lot of the things that the abundance agenda is talking about, the thing like NEPA, permitting barriers, right? A lot of these nerdy sounding things obstruct us from being able to proliferate the new technologies which are actually successfully reducing emissions.
Yeah, and I guess what I would say to Bad Empanada is like, how do you expect the distribution to happen? Right? I mean, we need to get at the end of the day, goods and services need to get from one place to another. We can't just snap our fingers and make electricity be in one place to another place. We have to build those transmission lines, as you were saying. And that's really hard to do right now. It needs to be easier. We need to make it easier so it can be done faster.
Right. And my understanding is that Bad Empanada is actually a fan of China. And if
Oh,
you're a fan of China, well, guess what? They have the abundance agenda, right? Like they've been building stuff like there's no tomorrow, and that's been helpful, right? Now, of
they've
course,
lifted a lot of their people out of poverty that way. Yeah.
right. And of course, people could say, well, Micah, he's not really talking about the whole world. He said, in the world, but he didn't mean that. He just means the United States. Even in the United States, we still need to do this stuff. Like, let's say we just confiscate the profits of every firm in the country, right? We do socialism. There's no efficiency costs. Everything works out perfectly well. The average net profit margin for these firms, right? The real profits at the end of the day is below 10%, right? Maybe you think it's a little bit more. Maybe you think it's a little bit less, but it's not 50%. It's not 60%. It's not a 100%, right? So, okay, let's say we confiscate them all. We redistribute it. It's all evenly distributed. Guess what? You're 10% richer. Things are 10% cheaper, something like that. It's not a huge, extraordinary change in people's quality of life. Let's say you redistribute income dramatically. So doctors and lawyers and high-paid professionals are paid less. We not only got rid of the capitalists, we're redistributing from the professional class. Guess what? Your income is not $150,000. That's not what it's going to be. It's going to be $65,000, right? Or $55,000. So, like, redistribution can only get you so far, and it is important. I think both me and you advocate for it. But the reality is, if you want to improve people's quality of life and you want to combat climate change, you're going to actually need to grow. He obviously has more to say on this.
The problem is that you can't build more stuff because we legitimately actually have an existential threat on the horizon to human society as it currently exists at the very least if we just keep building more and more stuff. If you build more stuff and your selling point is I'm going to build more stuff and give to the people who don't have it rather than taking away from the people who have a ton more stuff than they actually need and give to those people. Your selling point is that I want to end the world. That's what the argument you're making. You're arguing that you want to end the world as we know it rather than redistribute its resources from the people who have way more of the resources than they could ever use to those who don't. To those who actually need it, who have basically nothing. This is especially a ridiculous narrative because it's also coming in line with something that's even worse than just this narrative, which is the rapid rise of cryptocurrency and AI. These are two things that use ridiculous amounts of energy and provide literally no actual material benefit for the energy that are put into them. That this is happening at the same time, that like AI is getting big, crypto is getting massive, and we have people just advocating to build more shit without thinking about the fact that we actually can only build a finite amount of shit at least for a very long time, because there's not going to be any sort of grand energy transition to renewables anytime soon, at least not in the time frame that's needed. So we actually do need to build this shit for a while. We need to redistribute shit way better, especially given the rise of AI and cryptocurrency, which is an absolute disaster for energy consumption worldwide.
Does AI provide literally no benefit? The energy that you put into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think AI may be. It's interesting because AI it uses a lot of electricity, right? That's something that we're going to need to address. I think the fundamental problem that I'm having here is like Bad Empanada is essentially suggesting that we put technological growth back in the bottle. And I just don't think that's possible. I don't think it's possible that we're going to be able to roll back AI, have some sort of, Dune style, we go smash all the computers type thing. I don't think it's possible that we're going to convince poor countries not to industrialize. I don't think it's possible that we're going to convince everyone to live in a world where they have a terrible standard of living. And so, our only option, if you care about climate change, and I do care about climate change, I think it's an incredibly important issue, is we have to figure out how to generate energy at a large scale, cleaner.
And let's be clear here. A lot of the ways in which we have artificial scarcity are not ways that reduce our emissions in the slightest, right? So we have housing scarcity, right? Because we ban all types of dense housing, right? And so we have these car-centric societies that use a lot more fossil fuels, that have a lot longer utility lines, right? That are much more spread out and use a lot more asphalt. And so, okay, Well, removing those laws means we live closer together. We actually reduce our energy use. We reduce a lot of costs, actually. So clearly, the scarcity that we have in the housing sector is one that's not helping the climate problem. Car centricism is not helping the climate problem, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And it's like, well, okay, well, we spend a lot of time on rail and like highway projects. We spend twice as much money as we should, or 3 times, or 4 times, and we take all this time to do them. It's not that we're not using a ton of resources on those projects, right? We're using way more resources. That's why it costs way more. If we want to drive down the costs, right, the amount of labor, the amount of energy, the amount of everything that we need to put in to get something out, we actually need to do the abundance agenda stuff because it's going to make it more efficient for us to do those things, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, of course, you hit the nail on the head talking about the difference between what currently exists with like very car centric development and what probably needs to at least be legal, which is more dense development. And but of course, you have to build that. That's going to require concrete. That's going to require building buildings. Yeah,
But the long-term cost to the climate of people living in walkable areas using public transportation with it being less spread out, so there's less infrastructure footprint and cost to maintain, right? That the climate burden of that is actually lower than one in
yeah,
which we're
yeah.
all super spread out. So it takes time to transition. But like, yeah, all transitions of society, if you want to reshape society in any sort of major way, it's going to require us building stuff, right? And I guess you could have degrowth while you're building a lot of new stuff because you're just destroying more old stuff. But we're just trying to make it easier to build new stuff. So I think you should maybe we'll spawn
Maybe
a
he'll
new
explain.
cast of
Yeah,
abundance pill degrowthers from this
abundance
video.
build managed decline. Yeah,
An abundance of degrowth.
an abundance of not much. Yeah.
Ezra Klein is totally fine with a nightmare climate change scenario because what he cares about is that rich people get to keep what they have. The problem for him is not that like there's rich people who own 20 fucking apartment buildings and half the units in them aren't occupied. The problem for him is that we don't build more stuff instead of just seizing that from them and giving people that housing. Because taking that shit from them and giving it to people, do you know what that means? It means you don't have to emit more, because the construction is already done. In his scenario, you do emit more. So quite simply, these people have pretended to be against climate change forever when their actual actions show that they are 100% for it. They are for climate change. What they are against is actually doing anything to fight it. What they are against is taking anything from rich people to fight it.
So we already responded to this, but I think it's worth just like exploring for a second. The kind of mindset certain people like that Empanada have, right? Which is like fundamentally, everyone who disagrees with me is not only wrong, they're not only misunderstand the facts, right, or have slightly different moral values, they are actively morally bad, and they know I'm right, right? So Ezra Klein wakes up every single morning, and he's like, I need to defend the class interests of the wealthy, right? He wakes up, the wealthy send him a text. All the rich guys are like, go out there. You got this. You need to prevent redistribution because that's clearly on the horizon, right? That's definitely what's on the horizon in our politics right now. For some reason, it's something that's really at risk. And he goes out there and he says, I'm gonna fool these guys. I'm gonna talk about occupational licensing laws, right? Like I just don't know what kind of epistemological view you have to have of the world to genuinely think that everyone that disagrees with you is actively evil and knows they're bad and has a bad intention and a bad agenda that they actually don't believe in.
Yeah, and I guess I would just say to Bad Empanada or maybe people of his worldview, like, I guess try telling someone who lives in a shack in Lagos that we have enough housing. Like try telling someone who lives in like a slum in New Delhi that we have enough housing, or someone that can't afford um, food, that there's enough food available. Um,
Right.
there just isn't. Just because we live in the first world, and we have a lot of these things, doesn't mean that in other places that they also do. And these places still need to grow. The standard of living for the average person is still abhorrent in a lot of the world, and that's a tragedy in my opinion. It needs to get better,
Right. Well,
but it's
and
not going to
also
get better without building.
the abundance agenda is relevant in the sense that a domestic abundance agenda is relevant
Yeah,
because we need more stuff if we want to bring in more people,
yeah,
right? Which is something that I think a lot of people that champion this agenda believe that we should bring in more, good-spirited people from around the world that want to contribute to our country that are currently living in terrible conditions, right? And so that's a necessary prerequisite. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I find this mindset really frustrating.
I mean, what is there to say about that? I mean, it's just kind of yelling about what Bad Empanada thinks about Klein and Thompson. I I would be happy to, soak the rich, whatever. If that would make the world a better place, and we want to redistribute more from the wealthy, let's do it. The problem is that he's just wrong about there being enough stuff, or the stuff is at the very least not where we need it to be. And distribution is not a magic thing that just happens because we snap our fingers. The lines have to be built, the roads have to be built, the buildings have to be built where we need them to be. Distribution is not something that just happens. It needs to be facilitated. It needs to be done. I think the problem is, though, right? We could take all the empty apartments in Manhattan, um, all the very few vacant apartments in Manhattan. The vacancy rate in New York City is like less than 2%. There's more than 100,000 homeless people in New York City. You're not housing that many people without building more stuff. And I don't want people to be homeless.
Right.
I
Well,
don't want people to be homeless.
it's like, okay, that here's a talking point people said a lot. There is more vacant buildings in the United States than there is homeless people. Okay, I think that's true. Where are these vacant housing units? And also, what about the idea of having some housing which isn't filled with people, right? So if you want to move to a new area, let's say you want to move to New York City, right? If there's no vacant housing there, you can't move there because there's nowhere to move.
Yeah.
So the vacancy rate cannot be zero. And there's a lot of places where people want to live, but they can't live because it's too expensive. That means there's not enough housing there. That's the price is a sign of the scarcity. So
Yes. Yes.
if you want to live in a place that's different than where you currently live, right? And a lot of other people do too, it's probably the case that the housing prices are too high. That's why you've been kept from going there. And we need to build more housing to bring those costs down. If you take the number of people that want to live in New York City and compare it to the number of people actually in New York City, the number of units in New York City, there's just a huge difference. Right. And so it's like, okay, why is this a debate? Like I don't understand why we can't just build more housing and why this needs to be something we fight about. Can't we fight about, I don't know, like things that are more ambiguous, right? It's like, does this tax policy actually make the world a better place? Should we mandate co-ops everywhere? There's all these interesting debates, but then it's like, okay, should we have more housing where people want to live or no? Should we tell a lot of people that want to live there that you can't live there? To me, it seems like this should be a really easy slam dunk, but apparently it's not.
No, apparently it's world ending, right? It's genocidal.
It's
Um,
genocide.
yeah, I think it's just ridiculous. I think we obviously need more housing. We need more housing in the places that people want to live. I mean, I think you got it right whenever you said, where are these empty houses? And they're in the middle of nowhere. They're not where the jobs are. They're not where all the wealth and knowledge is created, and culture, frankly, is created in this country, which is, in these very in-demand cities. We need to make it easier for more people to live in them.
Also, there's a lot of people that live in really poorly maintained housing, right? So, and a lot of vacant housing is extra poorly maintained, right? Because it's actually going through maintenance or something like that. So it's like, okay, well, let's subtract all the housing that's actually really bad from the housing stock. Well, it turns out there's actually way less housing, right? Like the supply of quality housing is just totally out of line in each area with the number of people who want to live there. My last
Yeah.
question with Bad Empanada is, why do you like the status quo so much? Seriously, I get people, a lot of people are anti-status quo right now because the status quo sucks. I'm very anti-status quo. I think this stuff sucks. You look at the government, everything they're doing sucks. Like 90% of the stuff is pretty bad. Although Doge has found a way to make it much worse. Right? You don't just like shut everything down. This is definitely not an endorsement of Doge. But why do you want to defend all of these regulations that have been put in place, right? All these rules that prohibit competition, right? That prohibit the development of certain types of housing. That's been put in place by a government that you believe is controlled by the bourgeoisie. If the bourgeoisie controls the government, why do they need Ezra Klein to advocate for policy change? Right? They already control the laws. And to a certain extent, the powerful interest groups that Bad Empanada probably thinks control the government. Like they actually do have had a lot of control over the government, and they've done bad stuff, and that's why we want to change those rules. Like I think it's kind of an incoherent worldview to think like the capitalist class has complete control over the government, and also changing anything the government's doing, like all any this effort to change this stuff is fundamentally also a capitalist project.
Yeah, who do we think benefits from this stuff? Is it the poor people who don't have a place to live? No. No, it's the people whose housing value is protected. It's the people who already have a lot of money. It's the people who have the money to hire lawyers to engage in this weird regulatory process for them. It is not average people in 99% of cases.
And let's give a concrete example, right? So minimum lot size requirements. To build a house, you need a lot, and the government sets the smallest lot size that is available, right? The smallest you can subdivide a lot into. And in a lot of cities and towns, they require a lot that's over 5,000 square feet. Sometimes it's an acre in size. Can you find an affordable house on an acre-sized property? No. Can you have a walkable community if each house is on an acre-sized property? Absolutely not. Like that's the point. They put these in place so you can have more affordable housing because they don't want poor people, undesirables, right, as they often consider them, in their area. It's a disgusting and terrible thing to do, but it's the kind of thing that's happening. Why in the world would anyone on the left defend that kind of law or attack the kind of people that are trying to change that sort of law? And it's not just one minor thing. People say, "Oh, the abundance agenda is just about zoning reform." Well, by zoning is just a piece of the pie. Land use is a huge thing, and people don't realize how rigged the game is against the kind of dense, walkable, and affordable communities that we advocate for. But it's like it's not just housing. This is the case literally all over the place, all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, and just to drive that point home, if you are someone who is low income and the rules mandate that you must buy a house on an acre-sized plot, that doesn't mean that it's not just the house, right? You have to pay the increased taxes in order to maintain that suburban character. You have to pay for all the things that go along with living in a car-dependent neighborhood. You have to buy a car, you have to buy gas. All of these things are mandatory expenses, and we force people to pay them for no reason. Well, not for no reason, to help rich people primarily.
Right, to keep rich people, to keep the poor people away, actually, to
Yeah,
keep them
yeah, to keep
somewhere
them away
else.
from the rich people. Yes,
Right, right. That's the point. It's distance, right? And
yes.
you'll see some of these guys. They'll admit as much. They'll demolish bus stops in the rich neighborhoods, right, where they have a lot of these regulations that are the strictest because they don't want people coming in via public transportation. It's a pretty open thing, and it's a thing that like anybody who has I don't know any morals, and certainly anybody on the left should really really oppose.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for helping me respond to Bad Empanada. Guys, if you want to subscribe to Ryan, he's making fantastic content. Ryan, we're gonna put your ats in the bio so you guys can look
Thank
at
you.
his YouTube. His YouTube's doing better than mine. He's an inspiration.
Not for
Also,
long. You're famous
I
on
I, I
Fox News
am
and everything.
I know
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
increasingly famous these days.
yeah.
Also, if you are an abundance critic and you managed to watch this entire video, guys, I want to talk to you. Okay, I think that there's not enough good faith discourse on this topic. I hope that this came off as good faith. I wasn't trying to be mean or personal against anybody, but like I think there's a lot of name calling and like attacks and like fundamentally just bad faith approaches, like calling your people that oppose you like maniacal, evil, rich goons. So I'm not an evil rich goon, I don't think. But if you think I am, or you don't,
I am.
I want to talk to you.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll expose me to my face. Fantastic.
Yeah.